This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Obama's True Legacy, How He Transformed America. There's a reason why Mike Huckabee calls it a ferocious and chilling read. Order it now at Amazon.com or at FrontPageMag.com. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Hello, and welcome to another Daniel Greenfield moment on the Glazov Gang. You may have seen some of the horrible polls indicating the level and the degree of support for Hamas among American college students, among Muslims in America, it's at 57%, and among a whole variety of groups. Well, here's a poll you may not have heard about, which is that 1 in 10 American Jews, or Jews in America at any rate, support Hamas. One of the same polls that produced the 57% Muslims in America result showed that about 11.5% American Jews support Hamas, believe that its atrocities committed in Israel were justifiable, and 3.6% strongly agree that they were justifiable. Now, these numbers are, of course, horrifying, but there's an important context in which to place them, which is that these numbers are actually the least bad numbers of all the numbers for all the various groups in America. America, we have a problem. Support for Hamas, support for Islamic terrorism is a barometer of the situation. It's a barometer of the situation in our colleges. It's a barometer of the situation on the fringes, particularly on the left. Numbers should not be entirely surprising because when it comes to liberals, over 30% support Hamas. When it comes to people who live in urban areas, 40% do. When you look at the scenes of the large pro-Hamas rallies in New York City or in Washington, D.C., the bottom line is what you're seeing is a reflection of the 40% of support for Hamas in major cities. And it's not just Hamas. Yes, there are some people who are specifically anti-Semitic and hate Jews who may support Hamas, but say, for example, would not support Al-Qaeda. But realistically speaking, a whole lot of people support Islamic terrorists. And they support Islamic terrorists because they have been indoctrinated with the belief that America is evil, that our government, our constitution, our entire way of life is evil and needs to be destroyed. We are capitalists, we are imperialists, we are oppressing and suppressing the world's downtrodden. These are not bizarre ideas. These are ideas that are being taught as mainstream in every, or nearly every, college in the United States of America. So is it any wonder that we are seeing the numbers that we are? When it comes to American Jews, well, a whole lot of American Jews decided to send their children to college. They live in urban areas, and they've been addicted to liberalism. And when liberalism was taken over by the left, not nearly enough left. And that is the tragedy we are witnessing now. While the 11.5% number may be exaggerated, this is one poll, and one poll is debatable. And in general, I tend to warn people that polls involving American Jews are very poor because there are small sample sizes. This one tends to oversample the most secular Jews, and conservative and Orthodox Jews in the poll sampling make up only about a quarter. But, whatever the number is, there have been a few of the psychopaths who've been ripping down posters of kidnapped children. Some of those people do appear to be Jewish. When we've seen the insurrection, we've seen the riots and assaults in police officers in the Capitol Hill Rotunda, those took place under the aegis of two groups, If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace, at least some of whose members are indeed Jewish. Whether they're Jewish in any meaningful sense any more than Biden is, and Bill Clinton or Obama were Christian, is a matter of some debate. But let's for the moment deal with the fact that a sizable percentage of the American population, and Jews have as I said, the least bad numbers in this regard, have been indoctrinated into thinking that Islamic terrorists are the victims, they are the innocents, they are just lashing out because they've been so thoroughly oppressed. And this is a function of simply listening to the media while knowing no history whatsoever. Because if you actually know some of the history, then the premise is absurd. But if you think that history began in, say, 1967, or if you think that it began post-World War II, then some of this makes sense. And this is what the media, this is what academia tends to present. It tends to present not the ongoing conflict between Islam and the rest of the world, that is the actual history, it tends to present this idea that there was European colonialism that impinged on North Africa, it impinged on the Middle East, it oppressed all of these Muslim societies. It does not mention that these Muslim societies were, first of all, slave societies. The world's largest, greatest slave revolt actually took place in Iraq. Or that the only time that Jews and other minorities under Islamic law actually had any rights whatsoever was under the so-called European colonialism. When the French, for example, went into North Africa, that was the first time that Jews in the area actually received any kind of legal or civil rights whatsoever. But this is not the history that is taught. It is not the history that is taught, obviously, in universities or in high schools or in schools at all. It's not what's reflected in books, but it's also not what is taught by American Jews, unfortunately. American Jews have failed to pass on the legacy of Sephardim, Mizrahim, the Jews who lived in the Muslim world, who are largely ignored and overlooked by the history books, but they're also largely ignored and overlooked by American Jews who have failed to pass on the history of oppression and resistance by Jews living in the Middle East under Muslim rule. Instead, they've passed on this mythology in which a completely false narrative of a golden age in Spain, a golden age of tolerance under Islam. It is completely untrue. In fact, Jews were oppressed, they were massacred, they were forcibly converted to Islam in the so-called golden age. And as a result, Jews have no context, no history, and are easy prey for this sort of thing. There's been a focus on among American Jews who are more pro-Israel on teaching, why Israel is just, why Israel's case is right. But again, this history is very narrow. It focuses largely on, 1948, Israel's War of Independence. It fails to actually enclose the larger history of Islamic oppression of Jews, of why the Ottoman Empire was overthrown in the first place, and what the kinds of massacres like the Fahud, and for that matter, the history of massacres in the 19th and 20th century by the Muslim colonists occupying Israel of Jews. They failed to teach this history, and as a result, their children, unfortunately, are growing up ignorant, anti-Semitic, and in some cases supportive of Hamas. That is something that can and needs to be remedied. It needs to be remedied by actually with a strong grounding in actual history, real history. That is also the situation not just for American Jews, but for Americans in general. So many of us have been fed a false history, one that in some cases begins in the 1990s or begins with some sort of imaginary American oppression and imperialism, when in fact the only reason that America ever got involved in most of these places was to liberate them in one form or another. Some of these liberations were misguided, but the bottom line is we were actually trying to help people. So when you don't have actual history, and when the left, which is allied with Islamic terrorism, with Hamas, with every Islamic terrorist group around, especially Muslim Brotherhood groups like Hamas, the result will be very bad history, and the result will be support for Islamic terrorism. The American Jewish community has invested a lot of money into Holocaust museums, many of which have not even commented, let alone engaged in any major programming after the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. The entire narrative has failed very badly. It's time to teach actual history. It's time to teach the real story of the Jewish people. Thank you for listening. This has been another Daniel Greenfield moment with the Glazov Gang.